Hello everyone and welcome on back to the channel. We have some more profession balance to get into, and I found myself playing some Berserker, which is surprising. If you know me, I tend to not gravitate towards warrior builds. However, with so many changes in this patch, I just had to take a swing at it, and specifically a swing with a giant greatsword. Now, I am going to be mostly touching on competitive, but there are some general changes with the balance patch, and we're going to touch on those right now. First and foremost, when you go on Berserker, you will notice that you have your F1 burst back. So you will not be out if you want to use 3 charges of it to get trait procs. And then of course you have your F2, which is now your Berserker, and it's kind of reverted back to how it used to be. And alongside that general change, we have a general change for the trait Dead or Alive. This used to be a long 300-second cooldown in competitive. Getting rid of those traits, they have redesigned this to grant Blood Reckoning for 2 seconds when you are in Berserk mode. In competitive, it's 2 seconds. In PvE, I believe it's like 2.5 seconds. There was a modifier, so it might be a little bit longer in PvE content. But I've been playing around with this, and in PvE, I actually feel like I get a lot of use out of it. In PvP, I don't know if I've noticed it as much. I might have to play around with it a little bit more, but it certainly is more interesting than just having a cooldown of 300 seconds in competitive modes, and it feels like a dud of a trait. And speaking more specifically about competitive, I want to talk about my gameplay with Berserker. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I, of course, am not a Berserker main, nor am I a warrior main, sinking hours upon hours into the profession. And I've heard some comments from people who play warrior more often saying that there are changes in this patch that they don't necessarily agree with, or it might have weakened the class in certain regards. However, a player coming into this profession who has not played this before, I want to give a very raw and real reaction to this. And right off the bat, I just want to say that this has been a lot of fun. Despite the intricacies of the changes, I think my overall impressions with the way that they have handled Berserker has been very positive. Having access to that F1 is very nice. Having that option to use F1 is great. Whenever you're playing a game, you want to have those options at your disposal. And then of course, going into your F2, you have that same impact with your increased damage, your increased combat speed, your cast animations. And there was also a general change where they no longer have reduced your toughness while you are in Berserk mode. And you're pretty squishy if you decide to go down that glass cannon route anyways. So when they had this trait change where you had reduced toughness, you were even squishier. So now that that is no longer a thing, and of course you have your Dead or Alive trait, you have some access to more self-sustain while you're in Berserk mode. I, for one, have to get used to the class, and I need to still train with it so that I can survive a little bit better and of course utilize my movement abilities more precisely and more smartly. However, it is a very fun glass cannon build if you're looking to play that glass cannon, rushing in, doing really big hits, jumping between targets, but of course having the susceptibility of going down very quickly. Now, in competitive modes, there were more specific changes, and this has to do with the rage skills, and I actually have been playing around with some of the rage skills. These utility skills no longer will extend the Berserk mode by a long duration. They've trimmed it down to about 1 second of extension, but in turn, they gave these abilities access to adrenaline. So now you're actually able to utilize these outside of Berserk mode to get into Berserk mode, and it feels really good. And in PvE, they also, I believe they added some adrenaline to these skills. It's not nearly as much, but it's still something in PvE, and I remember always feeling like if I used these utility skills outside of Berserk mode, I wasn't really getting the most out of it, because it felt like while you're in Berserk mode, you just want to stay there, you want to be there, and I would always save them when I was in Berserk mode. And while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with all things MMOs and Guild Wars 2. Now for the abilities themselves, Outrage feels good. It's still your very quick stun break. It's very simple, but it's very effective. And I oftentimes pair this with, of course, Headbutt. Headbutt will no longer remove stability if you have it on you, so you might not need to use Outrage. However, sometimes you'll still get stunned by your Headbutt, and you'll have to use your Outrage ability. And then in addition to this, I've been utilizing Sundering Leap quite a bit, and its power coefficients have been increased in PvP and World vs. World, so it feels a bit more rewarding to land that Sundering Leap. And it's also a very useful mobility skill. And with the build that I was running on my power Berserker, I was utilizing the Greatsword Axe Sundering Leap. So I had access to rush abilities, to abilities that would apply cripple to enemies, and so I had the potential to chase down targets, which is always great, and Sundering Leap was definitely useful in certain situations to either enter a fight or chase down a target if need be. And as a whole, the power play style of Berserker, which I tend to gravitate towards, was very burst potential. It had a lot of burst potential, and it was very bursty, and it felt good. I also was playing this as a condition build on my Norn Berserker, and I gotta admit, I still felt this same amount of burst potential, considering burning is oftentimes a shorter duration condition. However, it pumps out more damage, so you give the enemy less time to react and to cleanse the burning. And while I was playing my condition playstyle, I was utilizing my longbow, and the longbow gives you access to distance. It gives you increased range so that you don't have to throw yourself into the middle of combat, and you're able to survive simply because you're pew-pewing from afar, using your arrows, shooting your flaming arrows to create fire fields, and of course having that lovely F1 on your longbow, creating that fire field, that persisting fire field, always feels great. And I think the two play styles of both strike damage and condition damage have a place in competitive modes from my playstyle, and especially in PvE. Now I'm gonna admit that I have not taken Berserker into high-end raids or strike missions, nor have I taken the time to really test the numbers in the training area. So I'm not sure how they're actually performing, but just from a very superficial playtime with the Berserker, it feels good. It feels accessible. It feels like I have options at my disposal. It no longer feels like I have to save my utility skills only for Berserker mode, but of course you're still getting a little bit more out of them if you are in Berserk mode. It's just been a great time as a warrior. I'm very much pleased. Now I'm going to say Blood Reckoning, which is the healing ability. It's the healing rage skill. In competitive, I am still having a bit of trouble with this heal skill. There are a few options that just feel better. Of course, Mending being one of the strongest healing abilities for Warrior. And when it comes to Blood Reckoning, you get a little bit of healing up front, but the bulk of your healing is reliant on how much damage you're pumping out. And in PvE, you're pumping out a lot of damage because of the numbers being so high. But in competitive modes, they tend to be tailored down a little bit less. And of course, you can't necessarily build as much vitality on a competitive character, so it doesn't really matter too much. However, it's a bit challenging in my playstyle, and in my experience, I haven't felt that I've been able to get as much healing out of Blood Reckoning as I would like. And of course, trying to play with the Greatsword. The Greatsword is a bit of a struggle. It's 130 range, but it's quite a big weapon, so I would like to see that range bumped up to 150, perhaps. And of course, with your Greatsword second ability, 100 Blades, you become stationary and you can't even pivot and swivel your character around if your enemy starts to flank behind you. You're really stuck in that animation. So I would probably argue to not take the Greatsword, or if you want to just really be cognizant of the fact that it might keep you in place sometimes. But other than that, Blood Reckoning is fine in PvE, but for competitive modes, I would probably caution new players to maybe take another healing skill. And that's really been my impression of Berserker. I think it's a really fun glass cannon, high physical damage, and also high condition damage if you build it so. I'm really enjoying my time. I'll probably play a few more PvP matches of Berserker, and I have a lot of interest taking Berserker into situations such as raids and strike missions to be that pure DPS, that hard-hitting character, and it's very fitting of the warrior and very fitting of the Berserker. Thank you all so very much for coming on by. Like the video if you liked it. Comment down below your thoughts about the warrior. Maybe there are some other warrior mains out there able to pinpoint some discrepancies that I've missed in terms of nerfs and changes. I would love to hear down below. Also, love to hear anyone's impressions since the balance patch with Berserker in particular. If you would like to support the channel, head on over to the Patreon, get early access to all of these videos. And thank you so much to my patrons. I truly appreciate it. I have links down below if you would like to purchase Guild Wars 2 or try it for free. And thank you all for coming on by, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye everyone!